All right, now we have something called a prism, and we have used some of these terms throughout the year here, and some of them might be familiar as well, but we're going to officially define it here. So a prism is a special type of polyhedron two of the faces are called bases. Those bases will be parallel and congruent polygons. And the side faces, the lateral faces, are always parallelograms. So if you look at some of the pictures over on the side here, like the rectangular prism, we're naming the prism based on its base. So usually it's on the bottom, but not always. So that would be, for instance, the base. The two red items I am outlining are the base. So in fact, on all of these, I'm going to actually outline the base, or I'm going to color in the base in red. So this one right here is a hexagonal prism, but notice that it's not sitting on its base. The base is actually facing us because the bases are the polygons that are parallel and perpendicular to each other. So the other base is back here. And then the base of our pentagonal prism, okay, so we've got the two pentagons that are back here, and those are the bases of the pentagonal prism. And here's a triangular prism, so there are the bases. So I'd like you to color those in with maybe a particular color would be good. And so my bases are red. And then you have the lateral faces. The lateral faces are the ones on the sides. So the lateral faces, which I will color in a blue here. And all of the rest of the faces here are lateral faces. And so same thing on this one, lateral faces are the ones going around the side. Lateral face, as I said, the lateral faces have to be parallelograms. Oftentimes they are rectangles, but they're not always rectangles, because if you have something that's kind of tilted, then it would be more of a parallelogram than a rectangle. And then you've got lateral edges, and the lateral edges, maybe I'll do that in purple here. So purple lateral edge would be the edge that connects the bases. So lateral edge right here. So lateral edges. This one, the lateral edges would be the ones on the side here. And we got some lateral edges here and lateral edges. So those are what we call the lateral edges. The lateral edges connect the two bases together. So there you have some of the terminology related to prisms. And you might hear the word right prism versus oblique prism. A right prism is a prism with lateral faces that are rectangles and lateral edges perpendicular to the bases. Okay, so a prism with rectangles for the lateral faces and lateral edges are perpendicular to the base. Okay, so right prism basically stands straight up. That's what that means. If you're just going to summarize, put it into your own words. It stands straight up and down. So the sides, if you're standing straight up and down, are going to have to be rectangles because they're all going to be perpendicular. So we've got 90-degree angles here. And so right here we've got rectangles. All of the lateral edges then, the ones that go up and down, are going to be 90 degrees to the base. All right, so you have more 90-degree angles in a right prism versus an oblique prism, which is the one pictured over on the right here. Notice now the lateral face right here is no longer a rectangle, it's a parallelogram. And so when we look at the lateral edges, the angle here is no longer a right angle. So that angle is not a right angle. So this right here is an oblique prism. So it's kind of tilted. Oblique kind of means tilted off to the side. And so that's the difference between a right prism and an oblique prism. All right, a couple more terms for prisms. The altitude of a prism is a perpendicular segment from one base to the other base. So a perpendicular 90 degrees, so perpendicular segment between the bases. And the height, remember altitude and height are very closely intertwined. The altitude is the actual physical segment between the two bases, and the height of the prism is the length of the altitude. Try spelling length correctly here. And the last one on this page is a pyramid. So like I said, lots of vocabulary today, just bear with it. It gets a little bit long, but we need these vocabulary terms. We need to understand what they mean in the context problems that we'll get a little bit later in the unit. So a polyhedron with only one base. A pyramid is a polyhedron. Good grief. Sorry for the spelling here. So a polyhedron with one base. Its lateral edges are triangles, or sorry, its lateral faces are triangles. That meet at one point. Called the vertex. Okay, so we've got vertex here, so there's our vertex. All of the lateral faces are meeting at that one point. So here are the pyramids in Egypt, and so those are the vertices, so vertex. And then you've got the lateral faces, of course, which are the ones. So if we're going to do the lateral face, those would be the faces on the side. Okay, so if it's oblique, then it's kind of tilting, but the lateral faces are the ones on the side. And then the base will be the polygon that it's sitting on. So it can be a square, it can be a triangle, it can be any polygon, but here would be the base. So we've got base and base. So the polygon that it's sitting on that is opposite the vertex is called the base. And you've got some lateral edges. So here's a lateral edge, these words kind of got split up here, but that's lateral edge. Here's a lateral edge, so edges on the side. And so those are the pieces of our pyramid that we are going to refer to.